Welcome to a story where history is not just dates and battles, but lives, choices, and consequences etched across oceans and continents. Before we dive deeper, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because what you are about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about the delicate, dangerous dance between nations. Imagine December 1861, a world on the brink. Britain, the empire that ruled seas and continents, suddenly prepares for war with a nation that had once been its colony, the United States. 11,000 troops are dispatched to Canada. Royal Navy steamships are readied, and war plans are dusted off for the first time since Napoleon. But this isn't just about military logistics. It's about trust, restraint, ambition, and human error that could ignite a global disaster. 50 years later, those same nations would fight side by side in Europe. Their economies intertwined, their navies coordinated across the Atlantic, yet no formal treaty of friendship would ever be signed. How did two countries transition from near war to cooperation? That question defines a story of restraint, calculation, and the fragile threads that prevent catastrophe. After the War of 1812, neither America nor Britain walked away as reconciled enemies. They separated as rivals, carefully measuring each other, understanding that another war would be expensive, inconclusive, and disastrous. For the United States, Britain was a looming shadow, its navy dominant on the oceans, its influence lingering on North American borders, and memories of maritime coercion still fresh. Independence had been won, but vulnerability remained, a truth American leaders would never forget. Across the Atlantic, Britain did not see a rising threat, only a young nation that was. Profitable in trade, but not yet a peer in power. Each step, each diplomatic choice, was dictated not by friendship, but by economic reality and careful calculation. The delicate balance of peace rested on the understanding that conflict could be catastrophic, and so, when the United States issued the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, it was less a command and more a test, a statement of intent delivered long before America had the naval power to enforce it. Britain's response was measured, understanding the imbalance, but also recognizing that American ambition aligned conveniently with British commercial interests. This paragraph alone reveals the intricate tapestry of power, restraint, and calculation that defined the transatlantic relationship. And it sets the stage for a tale of near disasters, moral dilemmas, and decisions whose consequences would ripple for decades. As the decades passed, the United States began to assert itself more boldly, testing the limits of British tolerance. In 1833, Britain reasserted control over a distant territory. Fallen Islands, prompting diplomatic protests from Washington but no military confrontation. The stakes were low, the cost of conflict high, and American naval capability insufficient. Yet, by the 1840s, Hawaii became critical to trade and strategy. Here, the United States issued warnings that Britain could not ignore. Strategic calculations dictated the responses of both powers. Where American interest was vital, Britain stepped back. Where it was peripheral, nothing changed. The Monroe Doctrine, long perceived as rhetoric, revealed itself as a framework of selective enforcement, dependent entirely on American capability and strategic interest. Every action and every restraint tested assumptions, shaped policy, and forged a pattern of behavior that would define the coming century. The real lesson, however, was that power, more than principle, determined outcomes. Restraint became a habit, a carefully honed skill that kept nations from plunging into unnecessary war. Yet, this peace was fragile, constantly threatened by moral crises, economic pressure, and human ambition. When the American Civil War erupted in 1861, Britain found itself in a dilemma it had long sought to avoid. The Union and Confederacy represented conflicting interests, moral obligations, and commercial dependencies that pulled at every thread of British foreign policy. Cotton shortages, industrial unrest, and social instability made neutrality a dangerous gamble. Then came the Trent Affair. Two Confederate diplomats seized by an American warship en route to Britain. Instantly, 11,000 troops were sent to Canada, and warships stood ready, echoing plans last updated during Napoleon's wars. The crisis subsided only because Washington stepped back. But the warning was clear. Restraint had limits, and even small errors could spiral toward catastrophe. British and American leaders understood this not as theory, but as lived experience. A lesson learned in fear, diplomacy, and human error. The stage was set for decades of calculated engagement, as both nations realized that patience, observation, and careful action were the true currency of power, far beyond cannon, musket, or battlefield victory. The Civil War, while domestic in origin, became a global test of restraint. Britain's economy depended heavily on southern cotton, and northern industrialists faced unemployment as mills slowed under blockade pressures. Food prices soared, and social unrest loomed across cities like London and Liverpool. Sympathy for the Union clashed with the financial and commercial interests tied to the Confederacy. The war was not abstract, it was immediate, personal, and inescapably intertwined with domestic stability. The deployment of Confederate raiders, especially the infamous CSS Alabama, revealed vulnerabilities in British neutrality. Built in British shipyards under the guise of neutrality, these ships sank or captured dozens of Union vessels. From Washington's perspective, this was not an oversight. It was evidence that restraint could fail when economic and strategic interests were at stake. Yet the aftermath demonstrated the emergence of a new mechanism of accountability. Through international arbitration, Britain ultimately paid $15.5 million in damages, a precedent-setting payment that cemented the principle that grievances could be resolved without war. Here, the seeds of modern diplomatic engagement were sown. Through crisis, calculation, and constraint, Britain and the United States slowly learned that cooperation, strategic, economic, and military, was more advantageous than confrontation. Suspicion remained, but habitual restraint replaced the reflexive rush to conflict. What might have been war became, instead, a proving ground for trust, enforcement, and negotiation. And each step forward, each crisis averted, slowly reshaped perceptions. From rivals separated by oceans to partners navigating a dangerous, interconnected world. By the late 19th century, the focus shifted. Britain's empire stretched across continents, and new industrial powers emerged. Germany's naval expansion threatened Europe's balance, forcing Britain to redeploy its fleets closer to home. Confidence in the Western Hemisphere required cooperation with the United States. Slowly, an informal alignment took shape. British ships moved east. American naval forces expanded westward. This shift was subtle but profound. It did not appear in treaties, but in practice. America's growing industrial and naval power complemented Britain's strategic redeployment. Both nations realized that war against one another was no longer rational. It was a strategic absurdity. The Venezuela crisis of 1895 confirmed this new reality. While Britain retained the power to resist, arbitration via the Monroe Doctrine demonstrated a tacit recognition of American influence. The old rivalry had not been erased by friendship. It had been redefined by circumstance, power, and mutual interest. When Europe erupted into the First World War, this alignment became essential. The United States initially declared neutrality, yet its economic, industrial, and financial contributions were critical to Britain's survival. German aggression, unrestricted submarine warfare, and the Zimmermann telegram eroded isolation, compelling America to enter the war in 1917. Together, Britain and America confronted a shared threat, not out of camaraderie, but necessity. Coordination in naval operations, logistics, finance, and strategy forged habits that would endure well beyond the armistice, permanently reshaping global perceptions of power, interdependence, and the cost of conflict. As the guns fell silent in 1918, old grievances did not vanish. But the expectation of war between Britain and America had disappeared. No alliance was announced, no parade celebrated newfound friendship. What endured was the understanding that conflict was absurd, counterproductive, and unnecessary. Shared experience, intertwined economies, and coordinated strategies created a foundation of tacit trust born from survival, not sentiment. From the trenches of Europe to the corridors of finance, both nations had demonstrated that restraint. Observation and careful calculation were more powerful than armies or navies alone. This is a lesson for us all. The consequences of restraint, the power of patience, and the lasting impact of wise decisions. History, as always, is written not only by victories and defeats, but by those moments where restraint prevailed over impulse, calculation over anger, and understanding over pride. And so, if this story moved you, if you felt the weight of history and the depth of human choice, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because more stories like this reveal the hidden currents that shape the modern world. Remember, history is not only what happened, it is how we interpret the choices, the risks, and the consequences. It is the legacy of decisions, of courage, and of restraint. And in that legacy, we see not only the past, but the lessons that guide the future.